Hello everybody, Dragon47 here. How is it going? So this is the second episode that I'm going to be getting out to you guys this week due to the fact that I couldn't make up for the other one and I really needed to get one out last week. I'm going to be doing a tier list with the current Pokemon in meta for the upcoming Great League that is about to start. I cannot wait to get into some games and I will be looking forward to trying to push myself to Ace or Veteran, maybe even further beyond. Just for the simple fact of I can say that I did it and I want to get the cool stuff that I can potentially unlock by reaching those heights. Let me know what team comps you guys are running. I'm curious as to see what you guys are going to think of my tier list. I want to hear your suggestions to what things you would change. Maybe you would want a few things moved around. I know all the Pokemon that I have on here isn't everything that's absolutely good, but that would make a tier list way, way, way too big. I'm just doing the main stuff that you guys would probably see more than likely, just by playing the Great League. Like, I'm doing the more common stuff that you're probably going to run into, and the stuff that does, well. And I threw a few other small things on there, too, just because I thought they were worth mentioning. But if you have a suggestion for what Pokemon you would want to see on this tier list, like honorable mentions that I know I don't have on here that I probably should have, but I don't, would probably be something like Pidgeot, maybe Charizard, because he's been getting a lot of hype recently. Perhaps even Cresselia, but in all honesty, I'm just trying to cover the most stuff that I can. Without further ado, let's dive straight on into the video. So, this category is going to be categorized as the flyers. These are like the flyers of the flyer meta that are really, really good. You'll see these paired up a lot with your average steel types or whatever, stuff like that. They're just really, really good Pokemon. We're going to go with Altaria. I'm going to put Altaria in the A tier. I think it's really, really good. It's not nearly as broken as it used to be due to the fact that we have a lot more Pokemon coming into the meta that counter it. And then on top of that, we have a whole bunch of other things going on. It's really good because it can take out Noctowl, Medicham, and Lantern all by itself. And Swampert, which is huge. But at the same time, it gets absolutely walled by things like Bastiodon, Galarian Stunfisk, and Registeel, right? Like, it just gets absolutely walled by those steel types. And it has no good answer as of dealing with them other than curling over and just flopping. The next Pokemon we're going to put up on the list, and I believe this Pokemon is an S-tier Pokemon. He is really, really good. Noctowl. So Noctowl is that one bird that everybody knows is super duper good. Yeah, he could still beat Trevenant, even though he's not really meta-relevant as of the moment, but he also can win against Medicham. He beats up Stunfisk, which is good. He can take down Shadow Swampert. He takes down Sableye. He has to watch out for that Registeel, kind of like Altaria does. Most of these flyers do. And he kind of has to watch out for Lantern, and especially the Ice types. That's like his main concern for this meta as of the moment is other Lantern and Ice types, because that's just what's in meta fashion right now. But, yeah, he's just really, really good, really bulky, very powerful powerhouse mon. The next Pokemon, my personal favorite flyer as of the moment, is Pelipper. I'm going to put Pelipper into the A tier. Pelipper is good because he can take out a lot of things like, as I said before, Medicham, Swampert, kind of like how Noctowl can. He loses to both Noctowl and Altaria, though, in, like, flyer fights, so it's kind of rough for him. I'd probably put him in, like, the third place spot, in all honesty. Maybe the second place spot, him and Altaria are kind of just battling for it as of the moment. But he can be really, really good because he can take out things like Scrafty. He can do decent damage to Quagsire. And yeah, he's just a solid Pokemon all around. The next quote-unquote flyer, I'm not sure if you'll call this one a flyer or not. I kind of do because he uses wing attack, He's a flyer in my eyes. I'm going to put Gliscor on... part of me wants to put him on C, but the other part of me wants me to put him on D. Like I said at the beginning, none of these Pokemon are bad. It's just a matter of these Pokemon need alignment, and there are others that are possibly going to do a little bit better than what you'd think. Definitely don't count these Pokemon that I'm putting in like the C and D tier out, though, because they're still good. You just need to find correct alignment for them in order for them to be good. And Gliscor is one of those Pokemon where you need perfect alignment in order to get him to work, but once you get him to work, he works extremely well, and he gets the job done. Our next category is the counters, or the fighters. So basically, I put down a whole bunch of Pokemon that can learn the move counter, that are half decent, and they just dominate in the meta. And the first and most important counter user of all of the counter users, and by far the best one, is Metacham, going straight into the S tier. There's not even a question here. Metacham is so good. He beats up those steel types. He beats up Swampert. He takes down just so much of the competition by himself. He has a great move set. He does great neutral, consistent damage. And just in general, he is such a good Pokemon. He even defeats the ice types like Whaleren and Alolan Sandslash, which is just crazy. He can win against Dugong. He's just that good. In general, just a strong Pokemon. Moving on. There's not much need to be covered here. We're going to go to Vigoroth. So Vigoroth, I'm going to put in the C tier. Vigoroth is that Pokemon that has great potential. It has good... It works to get... It's a team player. It works really, really good with other Pokemon, but by itself, it just really isn't up to snuff like Metacham is. He has Counter and Body Slam, which both work super-de-duper good for this Pokemon. He's unfortunately stuck with the move Bulldoze as his next move, though, and that's just not a super great move. And if he were to ever get that move changed out, I could see him moving up to like the B-A tier for sure. But as of right now, and in the current meta we're in, where there's a lot of flyers and there's a lot of ice types running around, he's going to do decent against those ice types and steel types, but with flyers being a thing, he's just going to struggle. He's going to sit in C for me. The next Pokemon I want to talk about for sure is the Scrafters. Scrafty I'm going to put into the A tier. Scrafty builds up damage and stabs so fast. He is just incredibly good at it. He defeats a lot of the other Pokemon that's out there. He's also the only one that really puts like Dark on the map for the most part that isn't a Guzzlord or an Umbreon, you know, or I guess Sableye. I guess Sableye and Obstagoon, but in a sense, I'm just going to go Scrafty here because that's just kind of how he rolls. He takes down all those steel types, as we said before, maybe not Registeel as much, but he's good because he can take out Swampert and Whaleren, and he throws a pretty good punch into Dugong as well. Just a solid Pokemon in general. Just a solid fighter. The next Pokemon we're going to be talking about in this list is honestly Haxorus. As cool as Haxorus is, I'm going to throw him in the D tier. I think he has more play in the Ultra League and quite possibly the Master League than he does in Great League. Breaking Swipe is a very, very good move for him. I'm very glad of the fact that he did learn Breaking Swipe. That made him actually, relevant in a sense because he actually has had good moves unlocked that he could potentially use and give him utility in said matchups. But the meta down here mainly consists of flyers, fighters, mud, and ice, right? So he doesn't have a whole lot of super great play here. He can take down some of the ice, but some of the ice will come back to hit him. And yeah, he can take down the steel types, which is pretty nice. But when it comes to flyers, and like I said, just other ice types in general, he just kind of tends to struggle. Personally, I could see him working. I've ran into one, and actually I have lost to one before because they partnered him up with a bunch of the ice types or whatever, to help compensate for the fact that they were running him. But in general, I feel like you're going to get more value if you play something different like Vigoroth, Scrafty, or Metacham, or maybe even get more value out of him if you're going to play this next guy, the big boy, one of my favorite counters, Defense Form Deoxys. He is so, so good this patch. He got so much better. He actually can throw hands with Metacham and win because of the bulk difference. And Deoxys has done nothing but get better and better in general, especially with the loss of Trevenant and the moves of everything else. He's just such a good Pokemon. Thunderbolt, just being able to dome any of the flyers out of the sky for free is nice. He can win against Noctowl. I'm just as surprised as you as to how he wins that matchup because, normally Noctowl has the Shadow Ball, but with Thunderbolt on Deoxys, he gets to it much faster than Noctowl can get to the Shadow Ball, which makes him even better than Noctowl is at the moment. He can beat up Lantern, like I said. He can take down the ice types because he's a counter user like Whaleren and the others. He has to watch out for Altaria and Umbreon, though, especially Umbreon. Umbreon is like his worst nightmare. And he has to watch out for Alolan Ninetales as well. Normally he would do decent in that type of matchup, but Alolan Ninetales has the neutral damage because it's a fairy type. So that's something that's a key thing to look out for when you're playing Deoxys. Next up on our list is Shadow Machamp. Now, people are probably going to argue with me where I actually want to put this dude as opposed to where I feel like I want to put him down here in the D, but I can make an argument for him to be up in C. He's a good Pokemon. He has a lot of stuff going for him. That he does a lot of damage, right? Like, he just does a lot of damage. He can take down Registeel and Stunfisk. He can beat Sableye. He can win against Noctowl, which usually is effective against him, but with Rock Slide and with how much damage he does, he actually wins the matchup. It's pretty cool seeing how he can flip matchups back and forth, but my problem with him is that he loses a lot to a lot of the other bulkier and tankier mons, like Medicham, Azumarill, and Swampert. Normally, most fighters are able to deal with Swampert like that, but Medicham inevitably is not one of those Pokemon due to how glassy he is. He's okay. I think he deserves a C tier spot. And I think if you align them correctly, like I said before, like again, for all these Pokemon, if you align them correctly, they're all really good, but some just perform better than others. The next one we're going to talk about is the Mud Boys. Okay, that's our next category. So the Mud Boys are all these Pokemon that have like Mud Shot and Earthquake, right? And they all have like other sorts of mud abilities that just are really, really good. They deal good stagnant damage, and they're just good Pokemon in general. First up on this list is Diggersby. Now, Diggersby, in theory, should be like a B tier, right? But in all actuality, I'm going to put him down here in this D tier. And the reason for that is there's a lot of water in the meta right now, and he struggles against the water types really, really bad. He does some stuff against the ice types with Fire Fist, or Fire Punch, my bad, which is really, really nice. He also can throw hands with the steel types like Registeel, Bastiodon, Galarian Stunfisk, which is all super good. But he doesn't do super great against the Flyers. Fire Punch helps a little bit with that, but he doesn't, that doesn't end most Flyers, and most Flyers tend to have resistance against Fire Punch that are good as of the moment anyway. And a lot of the Earth attacks don't really hurt anything that's in the air. And he tends to lose against fighters as well because of his normal typing. He's there to take out those ice types and steel types, but with the fighting and with the water and all of that in the meta, it's just rough for him to try and get spinning off. If you align him correctly, I'm sure he can do a lot, but in general, I just don't see him being all that much. The next Pokemon we're going to talk about actually is Whimscash. Whimscash, I'm going to put in the C tier. I think he's okay. He's definitely got some stuff. He in general is a solid Pokemon. Like, he's a good dude. He has some stuff. He has Blizzard, so he can take out those pesky ice types. Mud Bomb helps him take down things like Lantern, Galarian Stunfisk, and Bastiodon. He can take down Registeel. He can even beat Altaria, believe it or not, thanks to his Blizzard attack. He still loses to Sableye, Medicham, and Noctowl, though, and that's why he's kind of just meh. He's up in the air. He's good. He's bad. He's a little bit of both. I can see him being put up in B tier, honestly, but as of the moment, I just see him more as a C tier Pokemon. The next Pokemon we're going to talk about is Quagsire. Now, Quagsire, I'm throwing straight into the B tier. I think his cousin is a bit better than he is, but that doesn't mean that he is not a good or bad Pokemon. He is super duper good. Like, Quagsire in general, especially the Shadow variant. The Shadow variant is really, really good. But Quagsire in general just does so much. He can take out Registeel. He can take out Bastiodon. He takes out Frostless. He wins against Lantern, Galarian Stunfisk, things like that. He just takes them all out, and it's really, really good having him on lock. He loses kind of bad to Noctowl and Medicham, but normally when you're using Quagsire, you're partnering up with another Mud Boy, and usually the other Mud Boys can help take out things like that. Quagsire is just a solid Pokemon in general. He does so much, and look at his derpy face. You can't even be mad. Look at that derpy face. So another great Pokemon for PvP. Absolute monster. Good in all 3 leagues. The Chad himself, Swampert. Straight into the S tier category. Let's get it. Swampert with that Hydro Cannon damage doing so much damage. He's got Earthquake to deal with things like Registeel and Galarian Stunfisk. He generates so much energy. He has good stats. Just in general, Swampert is a nuisance. And Shadow Swampert can be just as good. if not more devastating, depending on the matchup. He just does so much good for what he does. He's just the ultimate DPS. Then we kind of go into our little steely. We're kind of starting to get more into our steel types. Galarian Stunfisk we're going to throw into the S tier. G-Fisk is just there. He's the tank. He's the lighter of the heaviest of tanks, you know, I'd say. That's the best way I can put it. Galarian Stunfisk is just a really good Pokemon. Rock Slide to take out Altaria. Earthquake to take out Registeel. You know, he does good damage against other flyers too. Like, he can win against Gliscor in the right matchup, and if you hold shields properly. He can do stuff against just a whole bunch of Pokemon. He's just really, really good. He has a lot going for him. He can take down Lantern, Bastiodon. Yeah, he's the tank that takes out other tanks. That is his role. He is the anti-tank tank, and that is why he's there. And speaking of tanks, because now we're in the category of tanks, we're going to talk about another S-tier amazing tank, Registeel. Registeel is so good. He is such a good Pokemon. He is the king, former king, we'll get to that in a minute, of just tanks. He is supreme. He has the best nukes of the game. He generates energy so fast. He's such a bulky mon. He can eat hits for days. Just such a good Pokemon. I did a video on him recently. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. Registeel is really, really good. Really strong, solid Pokemon. Next up for walls, quite literally, Bastiodon. So the reason we bring up Bastiodon is because he is the anti-flyer wall, right? None of the flyers can win. None of them win against Bastiodon. He has to watch out for some of the more mud boys and water users, though. He kind of has to watch out for Registeel as well. But in general, Bastiodon is so good because he can take out those ice types and fire types no problemo. And he's just a wall. He takes forever for you to get through. And by the time you finally get through it, you've already expended so much resource into just trying to get him down. He's already done stuff. So he in general is just a good Pokemon. Although he has been kind of... He's been kind of flopping between the S category and, in general, the B category. Personally, I think I'm just going to leave him in the B category. He's had stuff, don't get me wrong, but I think with the current meta right now, with all of the fighters going around, he will struggle to have some of those matchups. Don't get me wrong, he's still a very good Pokemon. Up next for tanks, we're going to talk about the Chad Lickitung. I'm going to go ahead and throw him right in the A tier. Now, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me and say, oh, Lickitung isn't super meta. I object to that. Lickitung is a very, very, very good Pokemon. He is a top 10 for a reason. He can take down Swampert. He can win against Lantern. He can take down Azu. He win against Sableye. He can win against Alolan Ninetales. Yeah, he kind of loses to Medicham a little bit, who's really into the meta right now. And he may lose to Noctowl and Registeel and Galarian Stunfisk. But hear me out. Lickitung into Medicham honestly isn't that bad. Because with Lick doing super effective damage on him, being his best move, it's almost a neutral matchup. Like, the matchup itself is almost neutral in that sense. Personally, I think people are undercrediting Lickitung as of the current moment, and I think he deserves a higher spot on this list. He is a great Pokemon. Definitely keep your eyes open for Lickitung. If you have a good one, you should definitely consider running it. It is a super grand Pokemon. Absolutely will be building mine at some point and finishing it off. I need XLs, right? Because that's what you need for it. It will be huge. You will not regret not having Lickitung. Next up on our tank list, we're going to talk about Umbreon. Umbreon's just kind of there to eat hits. It is literally just a bullet sponge. It kind of just sits there and just tanks the hits over and over and over and over and over again. It falls into this sad same category as Bastiodon, though, where it kind of struggles to deal with the other sorts of things, like the fighters, and he kind of struggles against the fairies as well. So, like, Alolan Ninetales, which we'll get into, is not good for him. He tends to have a rough time dealing with Azumarill as well. He just doesn't do very good into those Pokemon. He loses to Altaria, but he definitely has some stuff to where he can just eat hits, tank, and sit there. I'm going to throw him in the C category because he's just a solid staple. And maybe I'll throw Gliscor up into the C tier too, now that I think about it, because Gliscor is pretty good. Next up on this list, I'm going to talk about is the other tank, the final tank on this list, Azu. So I'm going to go ahead and plop Azu right here in the B category. Azu is really, really tanky. Like, it just eats hit after hit after hit after hit. It throws Ice Beam. It has Play Rough. It does good stuff. You can bait your opponent pretty reliably with it, and even if they don't shield or whatever, both attacks do some pretty decent damage. The damage is going to be enough to where it will be, somewhat substantial. Bubble is, unfortunately, its fast attack, and I know they've been trying to lower the idea of using Azu, but Azu has been good from the dawn of time, and it will continue to be good throughout the rest of it. Next up on our list is Regirock. Now, I know what a lot of people are thinking. You're thinking, why is Regirock on here? Why in all of the Pokemon you choose to put Regirock on here? Well, I'm putting Regirock on here because, like I said, there's a lot of flyers and ice types in the meta right now, and he kind of beats both. He wins against Sableye, he wins against Azumarill as well on top of that, and in general, he's pretty decent. Maybe not nearly as good as his cousin, Registeel, but he's definitely a formidable threat, and if you don't have an answer to him, and you're just getting hard countered by the Regirock, it's going to be a rough game for you. I think for the most part, though, I'm just going to throw him into the C tier. I don't see too many people running him, and if you're investing rare candies, you might as well invest them into Registeel because he's kind of the same thing, if not a little bit better. But, I mean, for the most part, it can be a fun spice pick if you're looking for stuff like that. Next up on this list, we're going to be talking about the cores and other things that people run for anti-meta and cores. We're going to be talking about Lantern. Now, Lantern, I'm just going to go on ahead and plop right here in this lovely A tier list. You partner Lantern and Noctowl together, boom, almost an instant win. It's just a good Pokemon in general, and frankly, it does so much. It counters flyers, it can take out some of the Mud Boys, it can do some decent damage to, the fighters or whatever, just with neutral water and electric attacks. There really isn't a whole lot of bad for it going on unless you run into something along the lines of, a Galarian, Stunfisk, which you can even go toe-to-toe with in a sense, or if you run into an Azumarill, or even if you run into a Registeel, that can be kind of bad. But as of for the most part, you do pretty good as Lantern. He's just kind of there. Some people are using him more as a switch nowadays as opposed to leading him in the early game, which some people have been doing. I'm not necessarily sure where you're going to be putting him this meta, but I do know that is definitely a Pokemon to look out for. Next up on the list is Double. So, Double is the utility knife. He just has all good moves, depending on what comp you're working with or whatever. I can't really say too much about him because I don't have a whole lot of experience with him. But I'm not necessarily going to count him out as like a bad Pokemon. I'm going to throw him in the solid B tier list. I know that there are quite a few counters for him that do exist out there. But like I said, he is like a Swiss Army knife. He can flop those types of matchups really, really quickly because he has so many good heavy moves on lock. Next up is the true anti-meta Giga Chad, Sableye. Now, Sableye, I'm just going to go ahead and put you right here on this A tier list. Yep, you can sit right there. Sableye is that guy you go to when you're tired of Metacham's crap. He's that Pokemon you go to when you want Metacham or Deoxys dealt with, because he's just good at deleting them both. He really just destroys them when it comes to going toe-to-toe. Sure, he may lose to a lot of the stuff that I mentioned earlier, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't win against a whole lot more as well. He can defeat Scrafty. He can defeat Galarian Stunfisk. He can take down Quagsire. Like, he just takes out all the stuff that kind of makes form the meta as an anti-meta pick by himself. You still have to watch out for Alolan Ninetales and Registeel, Altaria, Noctowl especially. That's like your worst matchup is Sableye versus Noctowl. But that's just kind of what's there. Lurantis and grass types. Okay, so I just have Lurantis there because I have a good PvP Lurantis, but I'm going to use Lurantis as a representation of a bunch of the other grass types that are in the meta. You can get away with a grass type. You can. It's possible. Especially if they're running double mud in the back, which a lot of people will more than likely be doing, or they'll be running double ice, and that is just as bad for you, which is why I'm going to put Lurantis and all grass types on the same spot in this meta list. In general, and on theory, it can be good. Grass types are amazing. They can take down the earths, they can take down the waters, and they have resistance against the counters, right? But the problem is that it's filled to the brim with ice types and flyers, and both of those are super duper effective against you. And if you get stuck in a match with any of them, more than likely you're going down. So Shadow Victory Bell, Shadow Venusaur, Magnium, Lurantis, any plant type that you can come up with is going to be decent on paper, but in execution, there are just too many mons that hard counter them as of right now. If some of those mons get knocked out, I can see them going higher in the list. But for as of the moment, I'm just going to throw them and all plant types into that D tier. There's really not too much I can do or say much about those. Sorry, that's just kind of the way it is. Komodo. Okay, Komodo I'm going to go ahead and plop into the C tier. It's a good Pokemon. There's a lot of ice types in the meta, though, that kind of make it struggle a little bit, you know. But it has Dragon Tail. It does good damage. And overall, it's just a solid Pokemon. I can't really say too much else about it other than that right there. That kind of goes same for Guzzlord. Guzzlord is just that neutral DPS that you need to help deal with some of the stuff. He throws Brutal Swing, which is a good attack, and he has a lot of good dark moves and good dragon-type attacks. But suffers from the same fate as Komodo, where there are just a lot of ice types in general, and usually the ice types that are in meta right now have access to fairy-type moves or are part fairy themselves. And Carbink being a thing also kind of throws a wrench at them. If you have the Carbink, which we'll get into here a little bit. Later on down the list, we're going to talk about Alolan Ninetales. Alolan Ninetales is the main reason why all these C-tier Pokemon are here. If you can't get past the Alolan Ninetales test, then you're going to struggle. Now, I know what you're going to say, oh, but some of these guys can't get past the Alolan Ninetales test. Well, although that may be true, most of them can, and most of them have team comps that'll just wipe Alolan Ninetales anyway. Alolan Ninetales, however, wipes teams that have these types of Pokemon in it, usually, unless it's Regirock, because Regirock kind of just domes it a little bit. In general, Alolan Ninetales is just the solid DPS. You can run Charm or Powder Snow. Both moves are good. I personally prefer Powder Snow. That's just me, but I know a lot of people out there still run Charm on it for a good Charmer. It has good moves. It's a solid Pokemon. Can't say too much more else about it. Up next, I'm going to kind of categorize these guys both together at the same time. I'm just going to go ahead and throw both of them up there. Dugong and Alolan Sandslash, I'm going to put both of them in B. By themselves, they are not great. Like, in general, alone, they are not super duper fantastic, but they definitely do got some stuff going for them. I think when you partner them together, though, and you give them like a Deoxys or a Medicham to work with, then they're a really, really strong team comp because they kind of cover each other's weaknesses in a sense. Both of them, like I said, the last patch, losing Bulldoze and getting Drill Run just made them that much better. They're both just really solid Pokemon. I think you'll definitely run into them at some point in your PvP experience, and you should definitely consider listening in on how to get rid of them and learning a little bit more about them. Up next on this list is Whaleren. Now, Whaleren got the Icicle Spear buff, right? Whoops. Where did I just get rid of? You. He got the Icicle Spear buff, right? Right. He has good moves. He just is a little bit slow compared to the rest of the Ice Cast that we currently have up and on here. Again, I'm going to be throwing him into the C-tier list. He does have Earthquake, which is really, really nice, because with Earthquake, you can take out things like Lantern, and you can even pose a threat to things like Galarian Stunfisk and potentially throw a threat to Pokemon like Registeel, which is really, really good, and Bastiodon. But the problem is that, like I said, he's slow. He is just a little bit slower than your average, you know, Ninetales, Dugong, or Alolan Sandslash, and that's why I'm kind of putting him in the C tiers, because he's a good Pokemon. He just is a little bit slower. If you align him correctly, though, I'm sure you can get some sort of craziness off of him. And the last but never the least Pokemon, the newbie that is being entered into the Great League for this season for the very first time, is Carbink. And I'm just going to go ahead and plop Carbink right here up on the S tier list. I don't actually have a copy of Carbink. I plan on getting one on the free Carbink day that will be coming up, where everybody will be able to get one. If you get the XL Carbink, I think good for you. I really don't think you'll be running into a whole lot of Carbink, mainly for the reason of not a whole lot of people have Carbink, right? And not a whole bunch of people have a good one that they're just ready to run. He costs a lot of XLs and XL rare candies because you need to power him up all the way. And in general, he costs, I think, between 50 or 75,000 dust plus candies, regular candies, to just get him that second move. If you have him, all the more power to you. I definitely would run it if you can run it, just because it is a solid Pokemon. It has really, really good moves. It has a good move set, and it domes a lot of what is currently in meta. It destroys all the darks with Moonblast and all the dragons with Moonblast. It has Rock Throw, so it can deal with all those flyers, and it has Rock Slide as just a good neutral damage attack. It's just a very solid Pokemon. If you are running Carbink, though, you have to be watching out for some of the other tanks and other DPS in the meta. You can win against Medicham, Noctowl, and Lantern, which is a competitive team right now, with just Carbink alone, which is kind of crazy, but at the same time, you make yourself highly susceptible and vulnerable to Registeel, Galarian Stunfisk, and Swampert, which are all three other S tier and very powerful Pokemon that other people for sure are definitely going to be running for as of the most part, and you definitely have to watch your back for that. But other than that, Carbink is definitely a tanky mon. He eats hits, and he's just a very good Pokemon in general. But yeah, this pretty much covers my entire PvP meta guide list for as of this upcoming season. If you think there should be a Pokemon moved up or down, you should let me know in the comments. You think if there's anything that I missed, I know there's a lot I missed, but that you think deserves a spot, you should let me know. This is just my personal list of how I see things on as of the current moment, or how they're going to go. And I hope to see you guys in the next video. Have a great one. Bye.